Today we're going to talk about sentence basics. Now, the sentence is the basic building block of the paragraph. So we want to make sure, we put our sentences together, we put our words together to make phrases, phrases to make sentences, sentences to make paragraphs, paragraphs to make essays. If we're having grammar problems with our sentences, then our paragraphs and our essays will be really difficult to read. So over the course of the semester, we're going to be going over some grammar. Not so much grammar like you would do in a grammar class with all the technical details, but of a more practical approach to grammar. One that cares not so much for the rules, but like more of the practical application of writing. Like I'm going to teach you enough grammar that you need to write the sentence well, hopefully. And one of the aspects of good writing that you're going to want to have in your paragraph is having different types of sentences. Paragraphs can get pretty boring and seem kind of simple if you're having the same type of sentence over and over and over again. In every paragraph you write, you want to have a combination of some long sentences and some short paragraphs. Some short sentences. And we'll go into I'll talk later in the semester about why, and we'll look at some examples. So hopefully you can see and understand why it's good to have different types of sentences, and what the impact can be when you have like a long sentence and then a short sentence. And it really can make your writing stand out and be a lot better. So today is just an overview of some of these basics. We will be reviewing and talking about these all semester long. So if something is confusing right now, don't worry too much about it. Please feel free to ask questions. See me in my office hours, see me in the EFL lab. But we will be reviewing and discussing these a lot through the semester. You'll probably be sick of it, honestly, by the end of it. So let's go ahead and get started and take a look at sentence basics. The basic building block of the sentence is the clause. And we take clauses together, we put clauses together to make different types of sentences. It's important for you to remember this word and understand what it is, because this is a word that we're going to be using a lot through the semester, and I want to make sure you'll need to really understand what a clause is, and what the difference is between a clause and a sentence, to understand some of my instruction and the way I'll talk about how you fix your sentences later when we start actually writing. So what is a clause? A clause is two parts, and here we have an example of a clause, and you can see the two parts. This example says, "My children are home from school all semester." And the two parts are the subject, seen here with "my children." It's a noun phrase. And a verb. The verb here is are, and also along with it you often get a complement, like home from school all semester. And it's basically, in the active sentence, the complement is all the words that come after the verb. But the main two parts, the most basic sentence, needs at least one subject and one verb, at least. You can have more, but if you don't have a subject or you don't have a verb, then you cannot have a clause. All right, so then next we're going to take a look at the different sentence types and how they use clauses. So here are the four sentence types you get in English. We have a simple sentence, which is just one clause; the compound sentence, which is two clauses; a complex sentence, which is two or more clauses; and a compound complex sentence, which is three or more. Hopefully by this point, if you've gotten into Composition 4, you can write simple sentences pretty much error-free. You might make some verb tense mistakes or preposition mistakes. That's fine, but it means that you are not making any major mistakes with your simple sentences. And the same thing for your compound sentences. At this point, your compound sentences should be pretty good. And so what we're going to focus on a lot this semester is the complex sentence, and right towards the end of the semester, the compound complex sentence. Although the compound complex sentence, it sounds like three or more, like long sentence, but it's really just a combination of compound sentences and complex sentences. So if you can write a complex sentence, if you can write a compound sentence, then you can combine those together. And it sounds a little scary. It might sound a little scary, but if you learn the first two, then if you learn compound and complex sentence, then the last one is actually not too difficult. Excuse me. So let's go into now more detail about each of these sentence types. First, a simple sentence. So take a look here on the screen. You see a sentence and a clause. Let's take a few seconds and see if you notice a difference between the two phrases, between the sentence and the clause. Can you see two differences here? All right, hopefully you've noticed two differences. We have first difference is at the beginning, the capital with the letters. You see the simple sentence, capital letter, clause, no capital. And then there's one more difference at the end. You see the difference at the end of the sentence? That's right. The simple sentence has a period. And by the way, the word for this is period. I know English has a lot of words for this little mark. If it's at the end of the sentence, it's a period. If it's in a web address, it's a dot. And if it's in a number, it's a point. So sentence, period, web address, dot, number, point. So for sentences, we're calling it period. And then so a simple sentence has it, and a clause does not have it. And that's really the only difference. Basically, a simple sentence is almost the same as a clause. Right? Again, just capital letter and period. All the words are the same. One subject, one verb. One subject, one verb. Grammatically, the same. Right. This is what we just talked about. One clause. A simple sentence is one clause. It starts with a capital letter. It ends with that period. Let's take a look at the next type. Compound sentence. Compound sentence, we said earlier, is two clauses. In particular, it is two equal clauses. At least the author has said that. Another way, maybe you can think about it, and we'll talk about it a little bit later in the video, is that it is two main clauses. There's no, one's not more important than the other. They're both equal. That's what I mean by equal clauses. There's not one important one and one less important one. They're both equal. To make a compound sentence, you need a couple things. The first thing you need is punctuation. There are two types of punctuation marks you need with a compound sentence. It could be with a comma or with a semicolon. Now, if you're using a semicolon correctly, the only time you're using it is to make a compound sentence. I should say it. I'm sorry, let me correct that. If you are using it correctly in an essay, in a paragraph, then the only time you're using it is for a compound sentence. In Composition 5, when you study research and writing bibliographies and works cited pages, then you'll be using those. You might be using the semicolon there. But in the body of your essay, the only time you should be using it is to make a compound sentence. That is its only purpose in that place. A word, though, on semicolons. What has happened in the past, when I teach students about semicolons, I tend to get papers back that have every compound sentence, semicolon, 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 semicolon. When I was in college, I wrote, 250 pages worth of papers and essays. I had to write a 50-page thesis for my master's degree. And all that time, I probably used a semicolon correctly, 5 times, 10 times. So, do you need to use 5 semicolons in a single paragraph? Probably not. Your first choice should be the comma and the coordinating conjunction. That is like the default. Like that's what you should use first. If you are having difficulty connecting two clauses together and the relationship cannot be described by a coordinating conjunction, then you use a semicolon. It's only if the coordinating conjunction does not work. If you can use a common coordinating conjunction, you should. That's your first choice. You only use the semicolon as a backup. All right, so coordinating conjunctions. Here they are, 7. Commonly taught with the acronym FANBOYS. They are for, and, nor, but, or, yet, and so. Right? These are the 7 words that, with a comma, create a compound sentence. 7 connectors. So, complex sentence. 2 clauses, sometimes more. A big difference, though, here is that in a complex sentence, the 2 clauses have a different relationship. In a complex sentence, you have one main clause and one subordinate clause. Now, most teachers prefer to use the term independent clause or dependent clause. There's a couple of reasons why I dislike it. I have to use it because that's what students tend to be more familiar with, because that's how most teachers tend to teach it. But there's a couple of reasons why I'm not a fan. One is how they sound, right? Like they're really similar. And I'm afraid sometimes that when I'm, especially for me, who I have a tendency to talk fast, I am not always clear, or I always have to say independent clause or dependent clause to clearly communicate to students, and that's just kind of a pain. So they sound similar, too similar, and the other reason why is that I feel like they don't accurately describe what the clause is or what it does. People say independent clause because how I've heard it described, at least, is that you can take the clause away from the sentence and it can stand by itself, right? Like without the dependent clause, it's its own sentence. It can function by itself. But when we'll see later in the semester, I'm not going to go into why that's not true. But a lot of times that's true often, most of the time probably even. But there's also a lot of cases where that's not true, where the independent clause, if you take it off, it does not function as a sentence. The same thing for the dependent clause. People will say, well, you can't take it away from the sentence because it's dependent on the rest of the sentence. If you take it away, it becomes a fragment. And I don't really think that's true either. But I won't get into those details yet. So, dependent and independent clauses are the common phrases. You'll hear me say a lot, though, main clause and subordinate clause. And I feel like those are more accurate descriptions because those are just more true. In a complex sentence, you have one clause. That's the main idea. That's the most important information. This is what the author wants you to know. And then oftentimes, the subordinate clause is just adding extra detail. Sometimes that detail is not even important for the meaning of the sentence. It's just to add more facts maybe, or in like a novel, or in like reading for entertainment, writing for entertainment, like reading for fun. It's just to add more details to make the sentence more enjoyable to the reader, add more visual description or something. So it's oftentimes not even important to the meaning, although oftentimes it is, but it's not the main idea. It's less important. If we break it down, and we'll see there's 3 types of subordinate clauses, and you can see like the word itself. It's called sub, means like subway, submarine, lower, and then ordin, as in order. The word itself means lower in order. The subordinate clause is less important than the main clause. And that's an accurate description of what it is. Not dependent clause, subordinate clause. Much better. Okay, sorry. That's my rant. Alright, so yeah, this is kind of what I just said, I guess. The main clause, most important part of the sentence, has the most important details. Subordinate clause is less important, It often has just extra details, and the author, like oftentimes authors, especially professional authors choose every word. They go over and they edit and they edit and they edit. We're only going to edit our papers one time because we don't have all day, and we're not getting paid for this. At least you're not. Kind of. Not enough though. Professional authors though are getting paid. A lot of them are getting paid a lot, and so they have time. They can go over every single word 27 times to make sure it's the exact right word for the sentence and for the paragraph or for the novel or whatever they're writing. We don't have that time. So, but those people, they have chosen that grammar and they have chosen the word in particular for a reason. And the reason why you make a subordinate clause instead of in a complex sentence instead of a compound sentence is because the clause is less important, according to the author, according to grammar. So let's take a look now. Compound versus complex sentences. To review, compound sentence has two equal clauses. It has a comma or a semicolon between the clauses, and it uses one of 7 conjunctions. Complex sentence. One main clause and one subordinate clause, or I should say, one or more subordinate clause. Sometimes it uses commas and sometimes not. That's where it can get a little bit more complex. As we learn about different types of subordinate clauses, we'll learn about the punctuation rules. And here's another reason why subordinate is better than dependent, because the connecting words in a complex sentence are called subordinators. They're not called dependinators. They're called subordinators. So it should be subordinate clause. I think that's the last one. Yeah. Okay. So next, we're going to take a look at a couple pages and chapters in the book, see some examples of these in real life, and practice identifying different types of clauses. So, for those of you at home, go ahead and go to Blackboard to see which pages in the textbook for today.